In the last 2 years, since the James Webb Space Telescope started to release a lot of its data, quite a few discoveries have already raised a few eyebrows, with some of the most unusual discoveries so far basically being from the edge of the universe, from the location very far away from us at extremely high redshifts. And this is essentially what the James Webb is actually really good at. It's able to easily discover these very distant objects when the universe was only a few 100 million years old, and when stars and galaxies were still just forming. But one of the more unusual discoveries, and I guess one of the more controversial ones, was officially announced and officially published sometimes in early 2023, and it can be summarized with this picture right here. Now you can actually learn the details in a few videos in the description below, but in a nutshell, it was a discovery of at least 6 different galaxies, specifically red galaxies, that seemed to be a little bit too massive and already existed in the universe 750 million years after the Big Bang. And these unusual 6 candidates had a lot of solar mass. For at least one of them, the solar mass was estimated to be 10 to the power of 10 or even a little bit higher. And that means that there were 100 billion solar masses in these early galaxies. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is only believed to contain 60 billion solar masses. And our galaxy took approximately 13 billion years to develop. And so something here was not adding up. And almost right away, we had quite a lot of controversial claims that maybe the universe was actually much older, or maybe the Big Bang theory was completely wrong, or maybe these were not galaxies. And we've actually addressed quite a lot of these claims before, but just to give you a short version of all of this, back then none of this violated the Big Bang or even most cosmological theories, but did potentially present a small problem for how we believe galaxies form. Maybe there was some kind of an unknown or misunderstood way to form galaxies, turning them into giants almost right away. Moreover, additional studies actually discovered that there didn't seem to be a problem here. At least one of the simulations that was conducted shortly after discovered that all of these galaxies could be produced in modern simulations such as the one known as Renaissance. And so in some sense there was maybe no violation whatsoever. Moreover, maybe these were actually not galaxies after all. Some studies claim that these were some exotic, bizarre objects, possibly even filled with dark matter, or something else entirely, or maybe these were actually extremely massive black holes that, due to their massive accretion disks, produced similar emissions to a typical star-forming galaxy. And the thing is, all of those explanations could be possible. Because of the enormous distances, and because of the small size of these objects, it was practically impossible to tell what we're actually looking at. There were no individual stars, and there were no individual features anywhere, just certain emissions of certain light that could be used to determine what we're looking at. But only a few months after, separate teams actually did discover a bunch of really massive black holes in a lot of these regions, suggesting that the black hole explanation was possibly not that far off. Maybe all of these were individual black holes with just a few stars, but mostly extremely large and extremely massive accretion disks. And so we're not actually seeing starlight. Instead, we're looking at superheated gas producing various frequencies as it spirals around the black hole. And because many black holes do actually produce somewhat similar emissions, at least compared to a typical starburst galaxy, here this was anyone's guess. But nevertheless, these were still interesting objects, and the scientists behind this most recent study, you can find in the description, decided to investigate them more, in the process discovering something else super weird. And so, hello wonderful person, this is Anton. Let's discuss these discoveries once again, but also discuss what we still don't understand and still don't know. Especially because, ever since these observations, additional observations have been now conducted, and now researchers have just a little bit more information. With the first confirmation being that these are indeed extremely red, faraway objects that existed when the universe was 600 to 800 million years old, but in this case, they also found what seems to be signatures of old stars. Not stars older than the universe, but stars that potentially are millions of years old, once again implying that all of this formed super quickly. And something that I guess nobody expected. And this was actually done by conducting spectral measurements, which revealed certain properties for various stars in these galaxies. But on top of these ancient stars, there were also signs of supermassive black holes. They were probably 100 to even 1,000 times more massive than Sagittarius A star, the black hole in the center of the Milky Way. And so here once again we had these unusual early universe objects with very massive central black holes and potentially a lot of activity around them, which might have resulted in rapid formation of ancient stars. And though once again this doesn't break cosmological models, it breaks the models for galactic formation and the growth of supermassive black holes. It was always believed that black holes and galaxies more or less grow together, but these observations suggest that this is not the case. Black holes potentially controlled everything early on and possibly forced a lot of galaxies to grow around them, which included stars forming very early and very rapidly in an extremely active dynamic environment that we just don't understand. Either way though, this currently confirms what the scientists refer to as the earliest signatures of ancient starlight. The starlight that, to some extent, is still kind of difficult to explain. And here the spectral analysis pretty much confirms that these are galaxies with black holes and star formation, unlikely to be unusual exotic objects or something else that was claimed previously. But the actual properties don't make sense. The black hole is way too large, the stars are a little bit too old, and all this can only be explained if these galaxies formed super fast. But that's actually the explanation that a lot of scientists are now leaning toward. Something in the early universe forced everything to basically produce a lot of stars quite rapidly, and that something could have been the existence of these very massive black holes that were essentially all over the place. But once again here, because of the distances, we still actually have trouble seeing details. This could still actually be normal mass galaxies with extremely massive black holes, which would be much easier to explain. But there's actually something else that's very surprising here. And it's basically the mass combined with the size, which really does not make sense at all. Or at least it doesn't make sense for now. Here what we're actually looking at is really small in size. These are at least 1,000 times smaller than the Milky Way galaxy, possibly only a few hundred light years across. But they seem to contain just as many stars as the Milky Way galaxy, with possibly up to 1 trillion stars in them already. Now these are just speculations, but these are definitely massive objects. And by containing so many stars in such a small volume, we're literally looking at very exotic, very unusual objects. Now maybe these are just proto-galaxies that no longer exist, or maybe these are seeds for all galaxies out there, including the Milky Way. Either way though, pretty much most stars in this galaxy would actually be extremely close to the super powerful central black hole. And so here a typical region might resemble something we find in a typical globular cluster, with some of the farther stars only 50 light years away from the central black hole. And that once again confirms that whatever happened here happened super fast, extremely suddenly, and using phenomena and mechanisms we don't understand. There is currently no explanation and no model that can easily explain the formation of these bizarre objects. The objects that don't even have a name yet. And though I guess these are galaxies, they're also possibly not. Because for some reason, we know that none of these objects exist anymore, and the universe stopped forming these after just a few 100 million years. But because they're so mysterious, there are now going to be additional observations in other frequencies in order to find out what they actually are. Here the focus is going to be on the absorption signatures, just to see what kind of elements they contain, and to discover the details of the activity within them. But I guess until those future studies and those future observations, at least 3 of these objects from the previous 6 still seem to be kind of mysterious and somewhat difficult to explain. They may be galaxies, they may be unusual black hole formations, or they may be something exotic that only existed early on. Either way, we'll come back and talk more about this once there are some additional discoveries. Until then, thank you for watching, subscribe, share this with someone who loves learning about space and sciences, come back tomorrow to learn something else, support this channel on Patreon by joining a channel membership, or by buying the Wonderful Person t-shirt you can find in the description. Stay wonderful, I'll see you tomorrow, and as always, bye bye.